Have you ever felt like someone smiled at you, only to stab you in the back when you least expected it? This is a pain that doesn't scream, it remains silent. It's the pain of trusting and being betrayed by the very person you swore was your refuge. But listen to this. What broke you before now only reveals what truly remains within you. It wasn't weakness. It was cleanliness. It wasn't the end. It was the revelation. Rumi said, "You have to keep breaking its heart until it opens." But what if he finally opened it? And what do you see now with that open heart? You see who was really on your side, and who was smiling while planting knives in your back. You see the fake smiles, the empty hugs, the compliments that came with hidden poison. Perhaps you're still stuck on that, trapped with people who smile but who silently sabotage you, those who pretend to love you, but secretly hope for your downfall. And do you know why? Because you are too much light for those who only live in the shadows. Because their presence exposes the masks of those who never had the courage to be whole. But now that you've woken up, something has changed. You can no longer ignore what you feel. You no longer romanticize the pain of staying where you're not seen. Now, you need to distance yourself, to distance oneself from those who confuse love with possession, those who say, "I'm here," but disappear when your soul bleeds, those who only applaud when you're down, because deep down that's where they feel bigger. Rumi whispers between the lines of his silence, "Don't look outside for what can only be healed from within." And sometimes, healing from the inside means cutting from the outside. It's about letting go. It's about leaving, even if it hurts. Don't be fooled anymore. The wound that marked you the most came from someone who said they loved you. But now the question is different. Are you going to continue allowing this? Because whoever hurts you in silence steals your soul little by little. It empties you with pretty words and cold gestures. It breaks you down with small betrayals until you doubt your own intuition. But today, you can feel it, you see. And if you've made it this far, it wasn't by chance. Perhaps deep down, your soul is asking for freedom. So listen to what comes next, because the truth that no one told you is about to be revealed. So before we continue, take a deep breath. If this beginning resonated with something inside you, comment now. I silently distance myself from what hurts me. It's not just a phrase. It's a decision. It's an act of silent courage. What if this video is already playing parts you didn't even know you needed to see? Leave your like. This isn't about numbers. It's about continuing to deliver content that speaks directly to your soul. Sign up on this channel, because here, every word, every pause, every truth was made for those who are tired of pretending they don't feel. Now take another breath, because what comes next will make you see clearly why certain people need to leave your life, even while smiling. Maybe you're not broken. Maybe you're just in the process of being reborn. Have you thought about that? That all this pain, all this silence, all these nights you felt alone weren't signs of weakness, but rather the first steps of something much bigger happening inside you, something the outside world can't see, but that you feel deep in your soul. Because true spiritual awakening doesn't come wrapped in lights and glory. It comes in the form of silent farewells, in the sudden absence of someone who was once everything, in words that hurt, in gazes that once embraced and now pierce through you as if they see nothing else. And then, in the midst of this existential void that seems to swallow everything, your soul begins to speak. And it speaks with pain. It speaks with pauses. It speaks with that tightness in your chest that you can't explain to anyone. Rumi said that the soul has its own path to healing, and that path is almost never logical. It goes through dark alleys of consciousness, through doors you swore you'd never open again, through people who needed to leave even when you still wanted them to stay. And maybe that's why you felt so lost lately. It's not because something went wrong, and it's because something finally started to go right, and you're still adjusting to the new frequency. The truth is, there are people who specialize in smiling while silently breaking you. People who know exactly where to hurt you, but do it in such a subtle way that you begin to doubt yourself. People who use love as an emotional trap, feeding off your self-doubt, your guilt, your tireless attempt to be enough. And you, in your light, in your sincere desire for connection, accept crumbs thinking you are being loved. But you're not. You're being drained. The problem is that when the soul truly loves, it takes time to understand what's happening. It wants to believe. It wants to persist. It wants to save. But there comes a point when even the sweetest soul needs to protect itself. And perhaps you are exactly at that point now. That point where the heart still loves, but the spirit has already decided to leave. Where you still remember fondly but no longer allow yourself to return. Where you realize that staying there is betraying yourself a little every day. You're not wrong for feeling this way. You're not exaggerating. You're simply waking up. And waking up hurts, because it reveals who was really with you, and who was only with the wounded version of you. The one who accepted everything to avoid being alone. The one who smiled to keep up appearances. The one who said everything's fine while crying in the shower. But that version no longer exists, because now you see. And when you begin to see, everything changes. The presence of certain people starts to bother you. False words become obvious. Hidden intentions are revealed. And you realize you no longer need to fight to be loved. True love doesn't demand war. It is peace. It is a welcoming silence. It is a healing presence. And everything that isn't that needs to be left behind. But this is where many souls get lost, in trying to understand why. Why would someone do this to me? Why did someone who said they loved me hurt me? Why do I still miss someone who broke me in silence? The answer is harsh, but liberating. Because you are human. Because your soul is still learning to protect itself. Because there is a point between pain and awakening where everything seems confusing. And you are exactly at that point. But that doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're evolving. Evolving spiritually often means cutting ties that your neediness created, but that your soul can no longer bear to maintain. It's accepting that not everyone who crossed your path came to stay. Some came to teach, others to hurt, and some just to show you how much you were forgetting about yourself. And the pain they caused, however unfair it may seem, was also a call, a silent cry from the universe saying, "Come home, come back to yourself. You are not broken, you are being reborn." And rebirth is lonely, yes. It demands silence, it demands distance, it demands the courage to look in the mirror and say, "I deserve more." And perhaps you haven't said it out loud yet, but your soul has already screamed. And that's why you're here, listening to this now. Everything you felt up to this point has a purpose. Every tear that fell in secret, every tightness in your chest that you swallowed so as not to worry anyone. Every time you pretended to be okay just so you wouldn't seem weak. None of it was in vain. It was preparation. It was the universe clearing the path. It was your soul in silence, crying out for liberation. And now, you're starting to hear. If you feel this video is putting into words what you've never been able to say, comment here. I am being reborn in silence. Because sometimes all we need is that small gesture of recognition. That phrase that becomes an anchor. That truth that, when written, transforms into healing. And I will be here, reading each one of them, because your pain is not invisible. It was just waiting to be heard. And now that you've come this far, it finally has been. Have you ever noticed how after waking up, certain pains don't disappear but change form? Before they screamed. Now, they whisper. But the silence they create still weighs on your shoulders. They cease to be storms and become fixed clouds, hovering over you even on sunny days. It's as if the soul has learned to endure without complaining, but not to forget. Because some pains weren't meant to go away. They were meant to transform. And this is a truth no one tells you. Spiritual awakening is not anesthesia. It doesn't eliminate the past, nor does it erase memories. It changes the way you look at what hurt you. Before, the wound was a period. Now it's a comma, a point of transition between who you were and who you are becoming. But this change, however beautiful it may seem, still hurts, because you begin to recognize truths you avoided. You begin to realize that many of the connections that hurt you were sustained by your own neediness, that the most toxic bonds didn't seem dangerous at first. On the contrary, they seemed welcoming. And then comes that invisible pain, the one no one sees, the one you try to hide yourself, the pain of being in a place and feeling like you no longer belong, of hearing the voice of someone you once loved, and realizing that something has broken, not in tone, but in essence. The pain of realizing that growing up is often about accepting that love isn't always enough, that love without reciprocity, without respect, without real presence, hurts more than absence. You begin to realize that the abandonment wasn't just physical, it was emotional. It was subtle. It was built up in small actions, in frequent absences, in glances that avoided yours. And perhaps for a long time you tried to convince yourself that everything was fine, that it was just a phase, that you needed to be more understanding, more loving, more patient. But now that you've woken up, you understand that what they made you accept as normal was, in fact, disguised abandonment. This is the pain that only the soul recognizes, that strange feeling of being surrounded by people, and yet feeling that no one truly sees you. That wound that opens not with screams but with silences. That doesn't bleed, but empties. And you begin to see that this emptiness has a name, that it was left by someone you held on to for too long, even knowing, deep down, that there was no longer any exchange. Just habit, just fear of losing what little remained. Rumi said, "You were born with wings. Why do you prefer to crawl through life?" Perhaps that's the question. Perhaps you've become accustomed to crawling, to begging for emotional crumbs from people who knew exactly how valuable you were, but chose to keep you small. Because for them, you discovering yourself would be a threat. It would be the end of control, the end of emotional manipulation disguised as care. And now, with this new perspective, with this awakened soul, you realize that the problem was never being sensitive. It was offering your sensitivity to those who didn't know what to do with it. It was giving profound love to those who only knew how to receive superficiality. It was letting emotionally shallow people dive into your ocean, and then complaining about drowning. This invisible pain is the grief for what could have been, but never was. It's the grief for a version of yourself that believed love was synonymous with resistance, that to love was to accept everything, that to forgive was to remain. But now, you are learning that forgiving is also to leave. That self-love is knowing how to say, "I deserve more." That true spirituality is letting pain teach you, but not define you. That healing is not the absence of pain, it's the presence of awareness. And the more you allow yourself to feel this silent pain, the more you understand that it has something to tell you. It's showing you that you're ready to move on, that the time has come to close cycles you've postponed for fear of being alone. That keeping certain connections alive is like trying to heal a wound by picking at the scab every day. It doesn't heal, it only gets infected. You're not exaggerating by wanting peace. You're not being selfish by choosing distance from those who hurt you. You're not cold, you're aware. And that awareness is the first step towards deep healing. A healing that doesn't come from outside, that doesn't depend on anyone. That is born the moment you decide not to accept less than you deserve. But nobody talks about how lonely this moment is, about how you can be on the right path and still feel lost. Because this void between who you were and who you are becoming is real, and it hurts. But it is in this void that the soul begins to breathe. It is in this space between the old prison and the new freedom that rebirth happens. You are learning to love without losing yourself, to distance yourself without feeling guilty, to trust pain as an ally in your awakening. Because in the end, only the soul knows what it carries. Only it understands the invisible weight of certain silences. Only it recognizes that behind every fake smile, there was a part of you trying to scream, "Please, see me for real." And now, you see yourself. And that changes everything. If at any point in these words you felt I was speaking directly to you, write in the comments, "Now I truly see myself." Because that phrase isn't just a comment. It's a seal, a milestone, a silent declaration that your soul has awakened, and that from here on out nothing will ever be the same again. You thought you were broken, but what broke was the persona you needed to abandon, the image you created to be accepted, the version you molded to avoid being left behind. That figure you built day after day to avoid bothering others, to please, to seem sufficient in the eyes that only saw what was convenient. And now, with everything in pieces, you feel the emptiness. But perhaps for the first time, this emptiness is the beginning of something real. Because what crumbled within you wasn't your essence. It was an illusion. The illusion that if you were more understanding, more loving, more patient, perhaps people would love you as you deserve. The illusion that if you tolerated a little more, one day you would be valued. The illusion that love is synonymous with silent suffering. And that is the cruelest trap of the wounded soul, confusing emotional resilience with spiritual virtue. Rumi said, Don't grieve. Everything you lose is transforming into something you need to learn to love. And perhaps at this moment, you are losing the last pieces of that self you invented to fit into places that were never yours. The weariness you feel is not physical, it's spiritual. It's the exhaustion of sustaining a story that no longer makes sense to your awakened consciousness. You spent so much time trying to hold together an emotional structure that was already cracked. You clung to bonds that no longer had a soul, only a history. And for fear of appearing weak, you stayed there, swallowing words, faking smiles, convincing yourself that it was normal to accept crumbs when your heart craved a feast. But this weakness you fear so much was never yours. It was planted. It was taught. It was conditioned. Because from a young age you were told that being strong meant not crying, that forgiving meant accepting everything, that loving meant persisting even when it hurt. And you grew up believing that, to be loved, you needed to be perfect, silent, invisible. And that's why now, breaking with all of that, you feel guilty, because the emotional system that shaped you still tries to pull you back, still whispers that you're wrong for wanting peace, for wanting distance, for finally saying no. But spiritual awakening breaks these invisible chains. It shows you that there is no evolution without rupture, that there is no freedom without detachment, that there is no true love without truth. And perhaps what is hurting now is exactly that, realizing that you spent too much time trying to be what others wanted you to be, when, in fact, your soul always knew who you were. And now she's shouting, not angrily, but firmly. She's saying, enough. Enough of diminishing herself to fit into tight spaces. Enough of justifying the emotional absence of others. Enough of accepting shallowness when you were made for deep dives. Enough of living surrounded by people who only know how to smile while silently draining you. The weakness you felt wasn't yours. It was a reflection of an emotionally toxic environment. It was the result of relationships where love was a bargaining chip, where care always came with a price, where your sensitivity was seen as excessive. And now, by breaking free from all of that, you finally understand. Feeling weak sometimes is part of the process of becoming strong, truly strong, strong from the inside out. Rumi reminds us that the wound is the place where the light enters you, and perhaps your greatest pain is also your greatest portal. The wound that burns now is precisely the opening needed for you to see beyond the illusion, for you to recognize that being spiritual is not about enduring the unbearable. It is about honoring yourself. It is about saying yes to your soul, even when it means saying no to others. And I know, it's not easy. There are days when everything inside you yearns for a return, for reconnection with the old, with the familiar, with what once hurt, but also comforted in a distorted way. But this oscillation is also part of the awakening. Your soul is learning to walk without crutches. It's discovering that it's possible to love without clinging, that it's possible to miss someone and still move on. And at this point in the journey, you begin to look back not with nostalgia, but with compassion. Compassion for who you were, for who had to swallow their tears, for who hid behind masks to avoid rejection, for who screamed silently, hoping someone would notice their pain. And you embrace this old you with respect, because it was this person who brought you here. But it is no longer this person who will guide you from here on out. From here on, it is your awakened soul that takes the helm, a soul that no longer accepts living half a truth, that no longer pretends everything is all right, that no longer remains where there are false smiles and an absence of real presence, that no longer sustains the illusion of weakness. Because now you understand, what seemed like weakness was in fact a sign, a calling, an invitation to your rebirth, and you are answering that call, with pain, with fear, with uncertainty, but also with courage. The courage of someone who has lost everything that was a lie, and now begins to build a life based on truth, on your truth. And it may be silent, but it is firm. It may be lonely, but it is free. And that freedom, no one can take from you. If these words resonated with some part of your soul, comment now. I free myself from the illusion of weakness. Because this phrase is not just a comment, it's a manifesto. It's your spirit saying that it's ready to live with truth, with presence, and with self-love. And that's the first step for everything to change. What nobody told you is that, after waking up, you don't go back to sleep. Because waking up isn't a beautiful moment wrapped in peace and flowers. Waking up, in fact, is brutal. It rips you from illusions. It breaks the silent pacts you made with your pain to continue living as if everything were all right. It forces you to look inside honestly. It makes you face not only who hurt you, but who you became trying to survive. And after you see it, you can no longer unsee it. After you feel it, you can no longer pretend you don't feel it. And this, however much it may seem like a sentence, is actually your liberation. Because now that you've awakened, nothing that deceived you before can hold you back anymore. You are no longer convinced by empty words. You are no longer fooled by promises without delivery. You no longer get caught up in cycles that only feed your emotional scarcity. What once controlled you so easily now seems small in the face of the awareness you carry. You see, and this vision, even if painful, is your strength. Rumi said that pain returns, but now you listen to what it came to teach you. And that's exactly it. Pain doesn't disappear with awakening. It continues to appear, in memories, in recollections, in triggers. But now you don't run away. You listen. You embrace it. You understand that it didn't come to destroy you, but to purify you. It didn't come to paralyze you, but to free you from the invisible chains you called love, loyalty, companionship, but which were actually emotional prisons disguised as affection. And the more you listen to the pain with this new perspective, the more you realize that behind it there was always a genuine plea, a call for you to return to yourself, because at some point, you lost yourself trying to be what the other person wanted. You distanced yourself from who you were to maintain relationships that only existed when you diminished yourself. And the pain, persistent and silent, came to remind you that this wasn't love. It was attachment. It was fear. It was a desperate attempt not to lose the little you believed you deserved. But now that you've awakened, something within you refuses to accept less. Something within you cries out for wholeness, for presence, for true reciprocity. And that's why certain people can no longer reach you. It's not that they've changed. It's that you've shifted your level of consciousness. What you once tolerated now suffocates you. What once seemed normal now hurts. And this, however confusing it may seem, is a sign that you are freeing yourself. The pain still comes, yes, but now you know what it represents. It visits you to show you where there are still open wounds, where you still carry memories that need to be embraced, where you still blame yourself for things that were not under your control. And you stop, you breathe, and instead of judging yourself, you listen to yourself. Instead of resisting, you allow. Instead of running away, you stay. Because now you understand. The path to healing is not to run away from pain. It is to go through it consciously. This is the power of someone who has awakened. It's not that you've become immune to falls, disappointments, and absences, but now you don't break like before. Because before, every word hurt as if it were a sentence. Now, you listen, reflect, choose what serves you, and let go of what no longer belongs. Before, you absorbed everything. Now you filter. You protect yourself. You honor yourself. And this, even without realizing it, is what is healing your soul from the inside out. Rumi said that the wound is the place where the light enters, and after awakening, that light continues to enter. But now you no longer fear it. Before, it blinded you. Now, it guides you. It shows you that no matter how dark the path may seem, you are not lost. You are returning to yourself. Every tear, every silence, every necessary separation, all of this is reconnecting you with your essence. And perhaps that's why no one else can break you. Because now you no longer give your strength to just anyone. Now you know you don't need to prove your worth. That you don't need to sacrifice yourself to be seen. That you don't need to abandon yourself to keep anyone around. This clarity, this awareness, this firmness, that's what shields you. Not from feeling, but from getting lost in what you feel. Because now, you feel consciously. You love with discernment. You surrender with wisdom. And I know, it still scares me. Because there's a strange emptiness after awakening. A space between who you were and who you're becoming. A silence between versions of yourself. But this silence isn't loneliness. It's presence. It's your soul saying, breathe, you're on your way. And on that path, everything that isn't real will fall away. It will slip from your hands. It will leave your life. Not because you're cold, but because now you're true to yourself. This new you no longer compromises your peace. You don't get lost in relationships that don't support who you are. You don't accept being where the energy is one of control, manipulation, and absence disguised as love. And even when it hurts, you remain firm. Because now your pain has purpose, it has direction, it has language, and you've finally learned to listen to what it always tried to say. You deserve more. You always deserved it. If these words touched something deep within you, comment now. I'm not going back to sleep. Because this phrase is a reminder that you've seen too much to turn back. You've felt too much to numb yourself. You've lived too much to continue accepting half measures. And now, your awakened soul begins to guide each step towards your truth. Maybe you were left behind. Maybe you were forgotten by someone who promised to stay. Maybe you were betrayed so subtly, so silently, that even today you wonder if it wasn't your fault. And for a long time, you clung to these questions as if they would solve anything. For a long time you returned to the same places, reread the same messages, relived the same memories, searching for some logic, some explanation that would justify why someone who said they loved you simply broke you. But today, with everything you've been through, perhaps the question has changed. Perhaps the question is no longer why did they do this to me, but why did I remain so long where my soul no longer breathed? That is the question that arises when awakening happens, not with guilt, but with awareness. Because now, when you look at everything that once deeply hurt you, what you see is no longer loss. It is liberation. You didn't lose love. You lost the fear of being alone. You didn't lose that relationship. You lost the habit of erasing yourself to be accepted. You didn't lose that person. You lost the illusion that you needed to beg to be seen, to be valued, to be loved. And that loss, however painful, was the greatest gift that pain could give you. Rumi said, "Don't worry. Whatever you lose comes back in another form. And perhaps that form is your new awareness, the clarity that now accompanies you, the sensitivity that once weakened you and now guides you. You went through a process that no one saw, a silent, profound, intimate rebirth. And this process wasn't beautiful, it wasn't easy, it wasn't romantic. It was sweaty, it was lonely. It was made of sleepless nights, of eyes full of tears in the dark, of screams stifled into the pillow. And it was in that place of emotional darkness that something within you began to blossom. It didn't happen overnight. It was in the soul's own time. You began to listen to yourself, to pay attention to your body, which tired just from being near certain people, to notice how your energy drained every time you forced yourself to please, to realize how your voice disappeared when someone belittled you with subtle words, but words laden with intent. You began to notice everything, and that's when the change began. You started saying no, even with a trembling voice. You began to distance yourself without making a scene, without needing long explanations. You began to prioritize your peace instead of appearing to be okay. And it was in this movement of withdrawing, of protecting yourself, of reconnecting with what is true, that you rediscovered yourself. Not the old version of yourself, but the more whole version. The one that no longer negotiates its feelings, that doesn't ask permission to exist, that no longer bows its head to be accepted. Because now you no longer need the person who made you beg. You just needed to wake up. To wake up from the emotional hypnosis that made you believe it was normal to love someone who hurt you in silence, that it was right to insist on relationships where only one side gave, that it was beautiful to sacrifice everything for crumbs of presence, affection, and attention. Now you look back and see clearly. It wasn't love. It was neediness. It was fear. It was a reflection of the wounds you carried and tried to heal through the other person. And today, with the eyes of your soul open, you understand that no one saved you because that wasn't the way. The path has always been about rescuing yourself, about stopping waiting for others to see your worth and starting to live it from the inside out, about ceasing to romanticize pain and starting to listen to what it has to teach you. Because pain, when listened to with respect, points the way out. It reveals the lie you were telling yourself. It exposes the places where your light was extinguished for the convenience of others. Now, you refuse to return to what was dragging you down, because something within you has risen again, not hastily, not under external pressure, but with the silent strength of someone who has already cried all they had to cry, someone who has already sunk to the bottom and is no longer content with shallowness. You have risen again with presence, with soul, with dignity. And this new version of you may not be entirely ready yet. Perhaps you'll still falter some days. Perhaps you'll still feel a sense of loss, still have doubts, but you no longer betray yourself. You no longer sabotage yourself. You no longer diminish yourself, because now you know. Those who didn't know how to love you taught you what you should never accept again. And that lesson is yours. It's tattooed on your history, and it protects you, even when you forget it for a moment. You don't need permission to walk away. You don't need justifications to prioritize your soul. You don't need to prove anything anymore. Now you just walk, silently, firmly, and with faith, because you know that the path you began when everything fell apart is the same one that is now leading you back home. If you felt this story could be yours, if this journey seemed to mirror something that lives within you, comment now. I choose to free myself in silence. May this phrase be the bridge between pain and truth, between what hurt you and what now strengthens you, because your healing begins right here, where your soul has finally been heard. You are no longer the one pleading. Now you are the one observing. And this is a silent turning point, an internal moment when everything changes, even if, on the outside, no one notices, because there is no fanfare in true awakening. There is a serene firmness, a deeper gaze, a presence that carries something new, discernment. You continue to feel, continue to love, continue to be moved, but you no longer get lost in what you feel. Now you see, and in seeing, you choose. Perhaps the world is still trying to pull you back to older versions of yourself. Perhaps there are still voices around you saying, "You've changed." And yes, you have changed. Because you grew tired of begging for emotional crumbs. Because you understood that love is not war, that affection cannot be a battlefield. Because your soul, exhausted from being misunderstood, chose silence as its shield and truth as its sword. And with these two invisible weapons, you began to write your own legend. Rumi said, "Don't settle for stories of how things happened to others. Awaken your own legend." And awakening that legend has nothing to do with great external achievements. It has nothing to do with proving to the world that you have won. It has to do with listening to yourself. It has to do with feeling peace within yourself, even when everything around you still seems disorganized. It has to do with stopping wanting others to choose you, because ultimately you chose yourself. You are no longer the one who insists where you are not heard. You no longer try to prove your worth in relationships that don't recognize you. You no longer engage in dialogues with those who only listen to respond, not to understand, because now you know that your energy is sacred, and those who cannot handle the weight of your depth simply do not deserve the privilege of your presence. Not because you consider yourself superior, but because your soul has grown tired of being reduced to pieces. You did not come into the world to fragment yourself for the convenience of others. This silent strength that now accompanies you didn't come from nowhere. It was forged in the fire of pain, in the furnace of rejection, on the days you cried without knowing exactly why, on the nights when your pillow was your only confidant, in the moments when you thought about giving up on everything but chose to continue, even without knowing where you were going. Each of these episodes sculpted something within you that now manifests as firmness. And this firmness is your spiritual strength. You no longer care about being understood by everyone, because you've understood that some souls can only understand what they've already healed. And those still trapped in their own wounds will always see you through the eyes of fear, envy, or incomprehension. But that doesn't affect you anymore, because now you observe, you feel, you understand, but you no longer get involved in other people's chaos. You no longer let yourself sink trying to save those who haven't yet decided to swim. And that doesn't make you cold. It makes you aware. It makes you present. It makes you whole. Because now you know that offering love doesn't mean abandoning yourself, that being compassionate doesn't require you to get hurt again, that being spiritual has nothing to do with silently enduring everything. It has to do with truth, with presence, with coherence between what you feel and what you live. And coherence, when it springs from the soul, has the power to silence the entire world. Before, you needed answers. Today, you simply watch the cycles repeat until they lose their meaning. Before, you questioned, why me? Today, you understand, it happened to me because my soul was ready to grow. And growth doesn't always come wrapped in applause. Sometimes it comes in the form of silence, of solitude, of detachment from everything that once made sense. And now, simply doesn't anymore. You walked away not because you gave up, but because you found yourself. And finding yourself is often the greatest act of courage anyone can perform, because it demands renunciation. It demands solitude. It demands looking inward honestly and saying, I stayed here too long, I got lost here, I gave more of myself than was fair. And now from here I leave. Not out of anger, but out of love for myself. This turning point isn't celebrated with fireworks. It's not something to be celebrated, but it's felt. It's perceived in daily choices, in the answers you no longer give, in the encounters you no longer force, in the messages you no longer send, in the places you no longer frequent, in the silences you now respect. This turning point is subtle, but it transforms everything, because it redefines who you are. You are no longer the one who begs. You are the one who walks calmly, who breathes deeply, who feels responsibly, who loves lucidly. And this new posture is not about shielding yourself. It's about protecting yourself consciously. It's about choosing where your soul can flourish. It's about realizing that not every connection is healing, and that freeing yourself from those who don't see you is sometimes the first step to finally seeing yourself. If you felt that this silent strength was also born within you, comment now. I awakened my own legend. Let this phrase be your seal, your reminder, your confirmation that you are no longer part of the past that hurt you, but the protagonist of the story that is now beginning to be written with the ink of truth. You didn't conquer the pain with force. You conquered it with presence. You stayed. You listened to what it had to say. You accepted that not every wound heals in the time the mind would like. You stopped running away. You stopped pretending. You stopped repeating that everything was all right when your soul was screaming for help. And this movement, which seems small in the eyes of the world, was actually the bravest gesture you ever made. Because brute force isn't necessary to heal. It takes courage to feel, to remain where it hurts, until it hurts less, to no longer put bandages on your soul as if hiding an emotional crime, to not run from the shadows that inhabit you, but to embrace them as parts that also desire light. Now you carry scars, not wounds, and that's what nobody understands. Because most people only see the exterior. They see you walking, smiling more, distancing yourself from certain people, remaining silent in certain situations, and they think it was weakness, that you gave up, that you changed. But what they don't know is that you didn't give up on anything. You simply rediscovered yourself, and in rediscovering yourself, you realized you needed to leave many things behind. That to remain whole, it would be necessary to detach yourself from everything that kept you in pieces. The scars tell this story. They don't scream, they don't bleed anymore, but they're still there, reminding you every day that you survived things you didn't even believe you could endure, reminding you that you loved even when you weren't loved, that you tried even when it was easier to leave, that you stayed in places that begged for your absence, just so you wouldn't leave anyone behind. And now, looking at all of this with different eyes, you understand that this dedication wasn't in vain. It wasn't wasted, it was building. It was the bridge between your pain and your strength. Rumi said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you, and that light that entered through pain transformed everything inside." At first you didn't even realize it. It was a strange feeling of no longer belonging to the same places, of no longer being able to hold the same conversations, of feeling that certain people simply no longer touched your soul. You felt displaced, and for a while you confused it with loneliness. But with time you understood. That was healing. That was you returning to yourself. A soul healed in silence has a different rhythm. It doesn't rush, it doesn't compete, it doesn't show off. It simply is. It lives with a different lightness, not because it no longer feels pain, but because it no longer clings to suffering. It understands that everything comes to teach, that every absence has something to reveal, that every farewell brings a direction, and that even relationships that didn't work out were teachers in the awakening process. This new truth you are experiencing now needs no explanation. It doesn't need defending, because those who truly feel your energy understand, and those who don't understand, it's no longer your responsibility to reach them, because now you no longer convince anyone of your worth. You live your worth, you breathe your truth, you manifest the healing you have achieved, not with speeches, but with how you care for yourself, how you choose where to be, how you protect your peace. You learned that silence is also an answer, that absence is also a stance, that not reacting isn't weakness, it's maturity, and that most of the time your soul only needed this: space, time, solitude. Not to isolate yourself, but to listen to yourself, to cleanse yourself of excess, to remember who you always were before trying to be what others expected of you. This memory is your new truth, and the most beautiful thing is that no one needs to understand, because this healing wasn't meant to be shown off. It's intimate, it's sacred, it's yours. Only you know the path you've walked. Only you know the weight you carried. Only you felt the pain that no one saw. And now, even without applause, you walk with dignity, not out of pride but out of self-love, not out of revenge but out of peace, not to prove anything but to live fully. This silently healed soul knows that what matters now is coherence, its truth, its presence. There's no more room for the rush to be accepted. There's no more need to fit in where there's no depth. And that's why you are at peace. Not the peace that comes from the absence of conflict, but the peace that is born from full presence. The peace of someone who knows that, deep down, they are doing what needs to be done. If, at any point in these words, your soul felt reminded of something you already knew, comment now. My scars are proof of my light. May this phrase resonate as a silent acknowledgement of your journey. May it be a reflection of your healing, not for the world to see, but for you to remember that you no longer carry open wounds, only marks of everything that has brought you here, and that these marks, far from shaming you, are the seals of your spiritual reconstruction. Close your eyes for a second, Nut, and realize you are here, after everything, after the pain that pierced you when no one saw, after the silent nights, where the pillow was the only witness to your inner struggle, after the wordless goodbyes, the silences that screamed louder than 1,000 arguments. You are here, and that, in itself, is a miracle, a rebirth, a confirmation that, even when everything inside you said, give up, something deeper, something silent and sacred chose to continue. No one can take that away from you. You awoke, and perhaps the awakening wasn't as you imagined. It didn't come as light. It came as rupture. It didn't arrive with peace. It arrived with chaos. It ripped you from your comfort zone. It shattered illusions you still insisted on protecting. It removed masks, dismantled certainties, made you look at parts of yourself you preferred to avoid. And even so, you stayed. You didn't run away. You felt. You went through it. And now, even without much explanation, you know that something in you has changed forever. The key was always inside. But what changed was who found it. Because before, perhaps you were looking outside, in others, in recognition, in the validation of others, in relationships that promised to complete you, but that ultimately fragmented you more each day. You thought peace would come when you were loved enough, accepted enough, understood enough. But now, with the eyes of your soul open, you realize all of that was just a reflection of your inner disconnection. There was nothing wrong with wanting love, with desiring connection, with seeking reciprocity. The mistake was never in feeling too much. The mistake was trying to fill with another person what could only be healed within yourself. The neediness that drove you before wasn't guilt. It was a desperate plea from your soul for reunion, for attention, for presence. And now, finally, you are present. You listen to yourself. You see yourself. You respect yourself. This invitation to inner recognition is a return, a call back to the spiritual home that exists within you. And that home never ceased to exist. It was only obscured by haste, by fear, by the demands of a world that teaches that feeling is weakness, that being emotional is losing control, that vulnerability is a problem. But the truth is that it was in your vulnerability that healing began. It was when you stopped pretending that everything was all right that you actually started to feel better. And now, in this silence you cultivate, there is truth, there is strength, there is clarity. You no longer need to shout to be heard. Your energy speaks for you. Your presence sustains what you once tried to explain. You no longer struggle to be understood, because you understand that those who truly have eyes to see will see, and those who don't see simply aren't ready. But that's no longer your problem, because now your priority is to remain whole, even if it costs you some absences. Internal recognition is this: seeing yourself with the eyes you once begged someone else to have. It's validating your own journey, your choices, your pain, your silences. It's accepting that the path that brought you here, however crooked it may have seemed, was necessary, because without it, you wouldn't have untied the knots that bound you to what no longer served you. You wouldn't have released the invisible shackles of guilt, attachment, and the fear of not being enough. And today, you are enough. You are more than enough. And do you know why? Because now you recognize yourself, and whoever recognizes themselves is freed. You no longer need to chase after what is yours by essence. You no longer need to fight to maintain what only remains through effort. You no longer need to explain yourself to those who only listen with judgment. You can finally rest within yourself. And this rest is not giving up. It is wisdom. Rumi said there is a voice that doesn't use words. Listen to it. That voice is your soul, and it has been speaking to you all along, in moments of silence, in moments when everything seems to stop, in the details that no one notices but that make your heart beat differently. That voice whispers truths that your mind cannot formulate. It doesn't shout, but it echoes. And now, after so long, you have finally learned to listen to it. And the truth that this voice delivers to you now is clear. You are the key yourself. You are the answer you've been searching for. You are the love you've been asking for. You are the home you've been trying so hard to find in the wrong arms. Nothing out there has the power to give you what already exists within you. No other human being has the mission of completing you. And when this understanding settles in, you change. You stop running, and you begin to walk lightly. If at any point these words touched a long-forgotten space within you, comment now. I am the home of my own soul. May this phrase remain as a seed, as a living reminder that you don't need to get lost anymore, that the way back is not in someone else but always within yourself, and that the most valuable recognition is not what the world gives you, but what you finally offer yourself. If you've made it this far, it wasn't by chance. Your soul chose to listen to the end because something within you is ready for the next step. And if these words touched parts of you that were forgotten, then you've already begun to heal. If this video spoke to you on any level, if it stirred something within you, subscribe to the channel now, because this journey of self-discovery, emotional healing, and spiritual awakening is only just beginning, and I want to guide you every step of the way. Oh, and don't forget, leave your like. This shows that you honor what you felt here today, that you validate this offering, and it also allows this content to reach other souls who, like yours, are ready to awaken. Now continue your journey. Click on the next video that is appearing on the screen. He is the natural continuation of this conversation, because his soul still has much to remember, and I still have much to reveal to you. Let's go together.